Well, I am so excited today to be able to introduce the Reverend David Ault. David's a visionary leader, not only in the New Thought movement, but really in an international way. He's a leader in what we call the human potential movement. He's an award-winning author, leadership and personal coach, global education advocate, and I love this, he exemplifies the motto that people would rather see a lesson than hear one. Amen? Don't you know that our world needs this today? Let's see a lesson and not just hear one. He's the founder of Kaleidoscope, a foundation for children. It's a nonprofit where he helps empower communities and children with sustainable life skills, education, water. He's been doing that now for over 20 years in numerous countries, helping thousands of children each year. He's also an avid adventurer. He's been to every spiritual site probably on the map, and then the second time he took people with them because of the power of those experiences. As if that wasn't enough, he's an award-winning author. We share something in common because he's a former Pentecostal turned New Thought, and now we call that Metacostal, a metaphysician Pentecostal. He's also a singer, songwriter, but a beautiful man with an amazing heart. Would you please join me in a warm welcome for Reverend David Ault?
I'm just so glad she's here today, to be able to hug her in person. You know it's going to be good do you ever get that feeling like pre-service where you feel like you're going to cry? It happened twice to me already in here, and I'm like, oh boy. I'm just so honored. May the words from my mouth and the meditations of my heart come from that pure, pure place, and I invite you to keep what works for you and discard the rest. So, earlier in the year, I was feeling a bit restless, and so what I tend to do when that happens is first take notice and then throw myself into something where I'm an absolute beginner. And there was a Zen Buddhist Mahamudra meditation course that I was completely unqualified for, and I got in, and I was just treading water because here I am with all of these established lamas and all these people who have been in devotional practices for 3 years and retreat things, and I'm just nervous, and thank God it's online because they couldn't see me shake every time I would come into class. And I felt like I was completely over my head, which I love, because the beginner's mind part of me, the one who wants to honor the perpetual openness and being willing to be teachable is ripe and ready. And somewhere in about month 1, the Lama was talking, and this was not a major point. It was kind of a throwaway sentence, but when he said it, I just jolted awake because he said, not what are you devoted to, but what are you devoted towards? And the moment that he used that phraseology, what are you devoted towards, this spaciousness opened up inside of me. If you kind of break it down language-wise, what are you devoted to, kind of harnesses itself around the who or the what. I grew up First Assemblies of God. I think we're going to heaven quicker than you are. That was the mindset back then, right? You know, praise God, hallelujah. Yeah, and I mean, you learned well, right, in those environments, because when our minister would go like this, you guys were responsible to fall out on the floor and start rolling around. It was very theatrical, and I loved it. But then I started to pay attention to the words, and I was like, And so, what are you devoted to? We're devoted to the religion of our upbringing. We're devoted to culture, to our country of origin, all kinds of things that we could say that we are devoted to. But what are you devoted towards? Just, again, that spaciousness, and it really had me think. And simultaneously, we were also studying what is called the five hindrances in Buddhism. And so the Buddha said that when you and I have signed up to come into this earthly body, we come in with these five hindrances. And I want you to hear the way I just said that. We come in with it. So it's sort of part of the curriculum for being human. It's not something that you did wrong. It's part of the curriculum that you and I get to then work through in our path of individualized self-awareness. And I'm sure you wake up and you read these five hindrances every day, and you practice them. So the first one is lust and greed. Lust and greed, really kind of that covetousness where you look at what somebody else has, and you become jealous. We all become jealous of that, or we have something, and then that limited mindset starts to believe in the idea that it can be taken away. So that formulates a whole path of behavior, right? And then the other one is hatred and ill will, agitation, my favorite, sloth and torpor, only because I like to say those words, that inertia that comes over us at times, and then doubt. And so when he said, what are you devoted towards? I began to experiment with this idea that our evolution, our whole reason for being, is to become devoted towards allowing ourselves to not run away from these things, be afraid of these things, look at these things as the enemy, but to turn to them every time we become aware that that's what we are experiencing, and then make ourselves available to, how do I dissolve this in this moment? How do I, as we might say, transcend this rather than sort of closeting ourselves and building up more pockets of shame and self-doubt or judgment or comparison? Often it's like, oh, I wish I was as spiritual as this person. All of that nonsense. When these things happen to us, we are invited to move from the conceptual, intellectual understanding of these words into the real raw and nitty-gritty and go, oh, these are my teachers. Isn't it cool? Sloth and torpor is one of your great teachers. Agitation is a teacher. It's not something that we then medicate ourselves from or distract ourselves from or run away from, or how we think we can geographically outpace these things, but wherever you go, there you are. And so we learn over time, I'm learning over time, that the more that I turn to them and I go, you're not my enemy, you're my teacher, things begin to soften. And a whole new realm of willingness begins to take place. And so, like your beloved Reverend Darlene, I did everything within my power to move away from the Assemblies of God background. But my path was then, I never want to have anything to do with God ever again. And I thought I was so good. I moved to New York City. I was going to be an actor. And isn't it funny how God has these ways? And I think I may have told you the last time I was here, I found myself back into this thing called New Thought or metaphysics by this woman named Louise Hay, who then became my surrogate mom. And then we traveled. And so I was like, whether I wanted to be or not, I was just kicked off of the top of the mountain back into this and sort of drank from the fire hose of what all of these principles are for. Which isn't necessarily meaning that I digested it. The intellect is still there, right? Kind of consuming and taking over, and it takes time. And here I am well into my 60s, and I am still learning how to be with all of this, and still that student. And it was about, I'm going to say maybe 2016. Senior minister, Atlanta, had been there for many years, loved it. I think one of the reasons why I got choked up is the atmosphere and the energy in here felt very familiar, like what we had created there, and I didn't realize how much I missed that. And so thank you for that. And it was a Sunday, and the same thing was happening. Prepare a lesson. There was probably a theme of the month that we were constructing. And another tragedy had befallen somewhere in the U.S. And not through anything that I did, but Atlanta, beautiful melting pot, and our congregation was a hodgepodge of Noah's Ark of everything. There was just everything there. And so it was not, I did not feel that I had the liberty to dismiss the events of the week, because something that had happened had a significant impact to a particular subset of our membership. And I thought, oof, there goes that outline once again. And I would find a way to work in the principle. And by the principle, I am saying that the one that we build all of our teaching from, and that is that the only reality is God. That love is all that there is. That there is one power, there is one presence in the universe, and we call that presence God the Good. And it's like, whew, well, that just happened. How am I going to teach that? Again, recognizing the rawness and the vulnerability of the human experience. How do I reconcile that? How do I take this principle from the intellect and find a way? And I struggled many, many times. I did the best that I could. But there were often times when I myself found myself going into one of these hindrances, which was doubt. And so here I am. It's about 2016. And I will describe, sounds really dramatic, and it wasn't as dramatic as I'm painting it out to be, but it was kind of an out-of-body experience. Because I'm like this. I have the microphone, I'm speaking, but all of a sudden I'm like, whew, and I'm watching myself do the prayer. I'm doing all the prayer again. There's a power for good in the universe. I'm saying all of the words, and this voice, this little annoying voice, said, David, do you really believe that? And I'm like, what? And I'm observing. It's very, very strange. And it said, David, do you believe that? And I said, And it progressed. It seemed like an eternity till where it then asked me, I said, I don't know. And then it said, do you want to? Do you want to know that God is truly all that there is? You ever asked yourself that? Like, and my favorite mantra, and it's been my mantra for decades, and something that has really navigated and helped me move across this experience well, is the most powerful mantra that you can ever say is, I'm available. And then it said, look out. Because if you're sincere, your whole world will change. That became the impetus for Kaleidoscope Child Foundation. I'm on the banks of a riverbed in Cambodia, starving kids, having this incredible experience, and I'm overwhelmed, and everybody's boo-hooing. And it was like, I'm supposed to do something about this. And it was, I'm available, not knowing anything. What I'm available does is it then hands-holds you. It moves you out of the intellect. It moves you out of the doubt, out of the torpor and the inertia, into a congruency with a soul plan. And just like that, on that Sunday morning, it was like, do you want to know? And I go, I don't know. Because I could feel an I'm available coming on. And I was like, ooh, I've been there before. And it really disrupted my world. Do I want to? Oh, and I went, I'm available. And I did say, more than anything, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of this ambiguity. I'm tired of reciting things that I've been taught. I want, more than anything, I want that which is as much knowing as possible to flow through this human instrument. And I said, do you want to know? And I said, I'm available more than anything. And the second big unraveling began to happen. 1,000 details and 1,000 stories, but this one, hatred and ill will. We think we got that pretty good, don't we? We know about hatred and ill will. We know that that's toxic and we shouldn't hold on to that. Wasn't really aware of how much it's kind of pocketed in the cells in there sometimes. And so I get this wild invitation from a minister in Los Angeles named Michael Beckwith. And it was like maybe, I kid you not, maybe 2 months after that thing happened, inviting me to go to this place in Costa Rica because someone from their center, Agape, had founded this indigenous ceremonial plant medicine place in Costa Rica. And he had been asked to be on the board, and it was this big thing. And what they were doing was they were bringing spiritual teachers in for the week. They couldn't pay you, but then you got to sit with the indigenous elders, and you got to participate. And I was like, yeah, I don't think so. I didn't even really, there was no taboo about it, but I just thought, that's not for me. And then he emailed me again, like 2 times. We're not like buddy. And I'm like, what? And that voice of I'm available, and off I go. It unfolds into like a 5-year adventure, going every year. The people and the staff, we hit it off really well. They would invite me to come, and it was rough. It was rigorous. And in one of those 5th years, very meticulously, things begin to unravel. And all of a sudden, I was in a ceremony one night, and I was taken back to Mrs. Delaney's house. Mrs. Delaney was the woman who lived on the street behind us. She was what we would call the poor man's daycare center. This was back in Beaumont, Texas. There's no regulations back then. And this was a very lower class neighborhood. We were very poor. And Mrs. Delaney sort of like would take all of us little rugrats and watch us while our parents worked. And I had specific memories about Mrs. Delaney's, but here I am in a jungle in Costa Rica in Mrs. Delaney's living room. And all of a sudden, some really horrible things began to present themselves to me. Physical abuse types of things. So much so that I willed myself up. I pulled myself out of ceremony. And I stood up, and we were instructed beautifully about things to do and how to seek assistance. And I got up, and I walked towards the shaman that was in the middle of this big maloca. And he was already helping someone. And the assistant, who they knew me because I was a day teacher, said, "David, are you okay?" And very robotically, I said, I saw something, and I don't know what to do with that. And I was instructed to perhaps go lay back down and to very gently and very, very self-compassionately just ask the medicine. So I'm walking back, and an attendant, there was a north, south, east, west quadrant, and the attendant there saw me coming, and she came up to me and she said, "David, I just want to let you know, Galaxy is in your bed." Galaxy was the dog on the property in Costa Rica. Very beautiful, zen, black female lab who was neither nice or mean. Just, even when you would pet her, she was working. It was like she'd be staring off into space. And she said, "Galaxy has come into the maloca, and she's in your bed. There's 90 people on the floor in this maloca." And I went, "What am I supposed to do?" And she said, "Well, obviously she's there to work with you. So just be very mindful when you lay back down." You ever go to bed with your animals, how they take the bed over? So Galaxy's like sprawled out, and I'm getting back in, and I'm already in this unimaginable state because I can't believe what I just witnessed. And I lay back down, and I followed the instructions, and I just said, "Is what I'm seeing true?" Because I did not want this to be some imaginative thing. was like, I'm not playing that game. I do not need another identity on my card list of all the things I've had to overcome. And it was like, no, I don't. I want to know. And I said, is what I saw real? And the moment that I asked that question, Galaxy took her head and laid it across my chest. And physiologically, it was like it went, like my heart burst and became the sky, and I began to weep and weep and weep and weep. And I, over the course of the next year, sought help. The revelations of what that was about came to the forefront. All the terms like dissociative trauma and the things that I had very much been in a place of honor to sit with other people, but never thought that that would be anything that had to do with me. And I'm like in my 60s. And I'm like, how could this be? I even judged myself. I said, how could you have been a minister all of these decades and not known that? But then I saw that my oldest brother was a professional baseball player. He signed on to the Toronto Blue Jays when the Toronto Blue Jays was formed. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. He was the brute man in Canada because he hit 2 home runs in the very first opening game of the Toronto Blue Jays. He was the first out of our family to escape poverty and become a millionaire. And he shot himself in the head and killed himself. And my other brother had this experience. My 2 sisters had their experiences. And all of us had experienced what it wasn't just me. I was the baby. But all of them had encountered the same type of trauma. And here I am, having a chance to come to a new understanding of hatred and ill will. And so I will say that there was continued work until one point I'm back in Costa Rica, and it picks right up from where it ended. And the story was that my father passed away when I was 7, but he was in the VA hospital in Houston. And there is a genetic heart malfunction on his side of the family. It's called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So he had it, I have it, 2 of my other siblings had it, my nieces and nephews had. Most of them have died from this particular thing. They labeled his as a heart attack, but really it was sort of just the heart stops from hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And so he had collapsed in the shower. I'm in the shower, well, I'm not in the shower. I'm hovering over the shower in the VA hospital in Houston, and I'm watching my father get into the shower. I'm watching him collapse. I'm watching an attendant nurse come in and find him, turn the water off, scurry out, and then there's that voice. Now remember, we were raised Pentecostal. So in the Bible, there's a parable where one of the landowners is praising some of his workers for the wisdom by which they use the talents and the money and the skill that they've been given. And he says to them, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Do you know that phrase? Well done, thy good and faithful servant. In fact, if you've lived an exemplary life, you go to someone's funeral, many times they will say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. That voice said, look at him and say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. I'd like to say that I abided by, I'm available, and I was like, oh, hell no. No. And then it was like, tell him, well done, thy good and faithful servant. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't think so. And then it said, tell him, well done, thy good and faithful servant. And I finally did. And do you know, he turned and he looked up and he went, and he said, you got it. You got it. And I went, you understand nothing is as it seems. I shared with you last year when I was here something that came to me during the pandemic, and it had to do with insanity. And you know the phrase, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I'm just like in my office, I had meditated. I was a good pandemic person. And it said insanity is forcing a singular dimensional answer to a multi-dimensional experience. I don't know how many of you do that, but I kind of do that every day. That's insane, because this singular dimensional thing is but a thread in a cosmic blanket of experiences. And so nothing is as it seems means, as I continue to be a student of that everything that I have labeled an annoyance, everything that is an agitation or doubt or hatred and ill will or lust and greed, they're all what? Teachers. And when we systematically begin to dissolve our resistance to them, Michael Singer, remember the untethered soul? He called it the thorn. So you can imagine it's like what the Buddha said, the 5 hindrances. We come in with 5 thorns, 5 sets of thorns. And it's a game. And so the game is, how quickly can you extract all 5 thorns? Do it, and you get enlightenment, And it's like a game, right? And so all of a sudden you go, oh my God. Because in the untethered soul, he says, look at the elaborate way in which we go to protect the thorns. Oh, this is my story. Oh, this is my wound. Oh, this is my ill will. Oh, this is my justification. All the things. And we go and we create environments and lifestyles rather than, as he would say, to do what with the thorn? Take them out. And all of a sudden it was like, do you want to know that God is all that there is? Then we got some thorns to remove. And see, you can't really remove the thorns with the intellect. How do we remove the thorns? Through our heart. How do we remove the thorns? By going up to the thorn and saying, hello, thorn. One of my favorite stories of one of my all-time beloved, oh my God, he means so much to me, Ram Dass. He would talk about how he really, really had a challenge with Caspar Weinberger. So much so that he was having his own doubt about his ability as a spiritual teacher. He just would become inflamed by whatever this person would do. And finally, he had his puja, his altar, where he had a picture of Christ, he had a picture of Anandama, he had a picture of Krishna, he had a picture of Buddha, of his guru, Neem Karoli Baba. And every morning he would come to his altar, his Buddha, hello, Krishna, hello, Buddha, hello, Caspar. Because he put a picture of Caspar on there. And so I make this game or this movie, let's call it our human experience, it's an altar. It's an altar. And so if you come back this afternoon, we're going to talk about the ways in which we can dethorn and explore and begin to pick apart and dissolve and see that it isn't so monumental or impossible as our minds want to play it out to be. It is this beautiful softening where we come in and we just begin to breathe, and all that we have been so afraid of is actually calling us to come, to sit with it at the table of transcendence. And so I want to invite you this morning to just close your eyes for a few minutes. I want you to think of your own storyline around these hindrances. And the question becomes, would you like to know that God is truly all that there is? That there is such a meticulous lawfulness at play. And all that it wants from us is to say, I'm available. I'm available. So do a little litmus test within yourself this morning by just focusing on your breath. And just like that voice said to me, I can say to you, are you ready to take this to the next level? So that which is the freedom that is our divine birthright, that which is the joy, the sustaining peace, the I amness, all of those things can become the thing that we are devoted towards, our I amness. Are you available? Just take a moment to sit with that question. And as we take a collective breath in, let us know that wherever we are is right and perfect. And that invitation for us to take those roots and to make them deeper is always there. And as we do it for ourselves individually, we do it for all collectively. May we find ways to be more and more available that come with such beautiful and sweet grace. And so it is.